What is it you want, Barry? What do you want? You want the moon? Just say the word and I'll throw a lasso around it and pull it down.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dying times here.
Come with me if you want to live.
That's it, man. Game over, man. Game over.
The Force will be with you, always.
Recording. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to 20th Century Geek. I'm your regular host, Scott Weatherly, and we are going to be diving back into the adventures of Indiana Jones, and I'm going to be accompanied by my faithful companion, Ray, from the Into the Night podcast. Ray, how are you doing, mate?
I'm doing very well, Scott. I was hoping you'd refer to me as a short round. Anyway.
Could refer to you as Willy, so...
No, but very excited to be here. It was so much fun doing the first two Indiana Jones films. We've just got to round it off now with a couple of doozies, the third and fourth one.
Yeah, so we've covered sort of like, the first one, which is an iconic film. Everyone sort of goes back to Raiders of the Lost Ark. And then the slightly darker sequel/prequel, Temple of Doom in our first part. So if you haven't listened to that, go back and listen to the first part of our retrospective. And today we're going to talk about the last two parts of this film series. Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade from 1989, and then Kingdom of the Crystal Skull from 2008. And I will say that these two land on very different ends of the spectrum for me. So.
Good. Yeah. I'm very, very interested to hear what you have to say about both of them. I might surprise you with a few things here and there as well.
Oh, that'd be good. I always like a few surprises. Okay. Well, let's start then. So let's say 1989. I have to admit, 1989 is one of those years for me that sort of I was probably I was eight coming on 9, so I was sort of the age when I was sort of starting to pay attention to what's in the cinemas. I was really starting to enjoy films, and for me, this is one of those years that sort of like was a doozy of a year. You had Batman, like the first Michael Keaton Batman. You had Last Crusade. Back to the Future was back in. Wow, so there's just like so many films are just coming out this year. 89 is just one of those years that sort of The Burbs came out, a great film. All these films that sort of came out around this time that I'm really sort of it's a big year for me. So Last Crusade is probably in that top echelon. Ghostbusters 2, sorry, that's the other one that I was thinking of.
Oh wow,
yeah. So Last Crusade, I remember going and seeing this twice in the cinema. When it came out. So do you remember it coming out, or did you ever see it?
I did see it in the cinemas. It really surprised me, Scott, that you say that it came out the same year as Batman, because I think I was caught up with a little bit of Batmania there.
Yeah.
Just that kind of exploded. The whole Prince thing as well. His soundtrack. But for the life of me, I did not realise it came out the year Batman did. But I did go see it in the cinemas, and it was really good. I was actually, and again, I'm actually surprised that it was in '89. For me, I was thinking it must have come out like in the '90s or something, because it doesn't look like an '89 film. If I can say that.
No, it doesn't. No, I know exactly what you mean. Like, this doesn't have that. There's a slight sort of veneer that sort of comes with 80s sort of films, and this definitely sort of feels a bit more timeless. But it's a crack. I love this film, and I can't even hide how much I love this film, because although I was an indie fan, this was the sort of like the first one I could get to see in the cinema. Like, I was born '81, so the same year as Raiders. Too young really to go see Temple of Doom, in '84. So this was really the first one I was able to go see at the cinema. So this one I really hold like a nostalgic sort of love for this film.
Yeah, I'm exactly like. Oops, sorry.
Go on.
I'm exactly like you, Scott, as well. I was too young. I'm a little bit older than you, but I was still too young to watch Raiders of the Lost Ark or Temple of Doom in the cinemas. So this was the first one. But at that stage, I was very well familiar with the Indiana Jones lore, and so was really excited to see this as well. And look, similar to you, I love this film. I think everything is. I think the staff of Ra aligns perfectly with the sunlight here. I think it's a perfect encapsulation of the character and everything that Spielberg and Lucas wanted to do with the character.
No, I agree. It's almost like, that first version, and we'll get into the plot and stuff in a minute, but that first version, Raiders, is sort of like they were going for that sort of tough, grizzled, adventure sort of serial feel, weren't they? From sort of from the early 30s and the 40s, and they capture it well. And Indy is supposed to be that sort of character, but it's still very sort of based in reality. It's still sort of there's jokes, but there's no it's not a humorous film. And then there's obviously Temple of Doom is a bit darker. There's some more jokes in it, but within this film, I think they just balance that sort of adventure and that adventure and humour perfectly. It's so well done. I mean, it's where Spielberg really sort of plays to his strengths. If anything, I'll tell you what. This film felt to me more like not so much the MCU. Sort of like there's more serious MCU films. I'm thinking like Winter Soldier or some of the Cap films. Really, this felt a similar tone to that. Do you know what I mean? So,
right, the darker ones.
No, sort of where they've actually sort of really where they've maybe not Winter Soldier. I'm thinking more maybe the first Cap film, but there's a real good balance that the MCU strikes between like adventure and action and humour, and I sort of feel like it's encapsulated in this film just as well.
Yeah, and look, I'm a bigger fan of the MCU as any, but you can't go past the classic. I'll say that even still, Last Crusade shoots it out of the water, in that regard with the balancing and the combination. Because it was kind of a very special mix, this film, because... so we were familiar with Indiana Jones, and so there were references to the older films, which the fans would appreciate. I guess it's like fan service, they could say. But Indiana Jones, Harrison Ford was still in his prime. He was so enthusiastic, so much energy, but this kind of chemistry he had with Sean Connery, I think, just clinched it for me. The way they played off each other, the comedic timing between the two, this whole thing about father and son, and even also the origin of having someone as big as like River Phoenix at the beginning, was a real kind of like eye opener as well. And River Phoenix played it so well. Like on the rewatch here, you can see all the mannerisms he picks up from Harrison Ford, and he tries to, portray that as well in his version of young Indy, and he certainly does. So there are so many things, as well as all the usuals like the action, the car chasing, the hint of supernatural, which, mind you, I think as we mentioned previously in the other episode, this is a pinnacle of like this is the Holy Grail. So you can't get any bigger and better than this.
It is literally the Holy Grail.
Yeah. It's so good.
It is, and let's jump in with the plot summary for those, because there's so much to talk about. But first, let's say, released in 1989, directed by Steven Spielberg, written by Jeffrey Boehm, story by George Lucas. It stars Harrison Ford as Indiana Jones, and then has quite a sort of a solid cast again. So you get you've got Sean Connery as his dad, Henry Jones, Professor Henry Jones, or Henry Jones Sr., as we learn in this film. Denham Elliott returning as Marcus Brody, Alison Doody as Elsa, John Rhys Davies returning as Sala, Julian Glover as Walter Donovan, Michael Byrne as Vogel, the Nazi colonel. So you get the Nazis returning, and as you said, River Phoenix starring as young Indiana Jones. And again, this film sort of picks up and has that cold open, a fantastically cold open, which to me fits with that sort of notion of the first film. It's like a short film. You get we'll get into it in a bit, but you get the origin story for a lot of things, and almost like the inspiration for Indiana Jones.
Yes.
As a young Indiana Jones chases after the Cross of Coronado, determined to say that it belongs in the museum. Later in life, though, we sort of see that he has been able to track down that the Cross of Coronado, and it sort of rounds out that mini adventure. coming back to America, we find that his father, Professor Henry Jones, has gone missing, and he was working with a group in Venice to search for clues on the trail of the Holy Grail, the cup from which Christ drank at the Last Supper. He, accompanied by Denham Elliott, Marcus Brody, Indy goes to Venice and meets with Elsa, who may or may not be on his side, and finally tracks down his father, played by Sean Connery, and the two then venture off into the desert to search for the Holy Grail, being pursued by a horde of Nazis. So, let's go back to the very beginning. This opening, this 1912 it's set in, this origin of Indiana Jones, River Phoenix playing, well, basically like a scout, isn't it? They're like a bunch of scouts on horseback. Yeah. What do you think about this whole opening?
Oh, this opening is brilliant. It's I don't know. I put it. I can't say on par with the Raiders of the Lost Ark, because that is just part of cinematic history. But this is very close to a very successful cold opening, as you say. It's a nice self-contained story. River Phoenix carries it brilliantly. There's enough kind of action, and the humour is straight away injected into it. But plus you get a boatload of references for anyone that has followed Indiana Jones. I love the idea about learning, and it's a real life scar, right, underneath Harrison Ford's lip. Yeah, they've included that in there, just kind of explain where that comes from. So, and also the introduction of where Indiana gets the whip, his fear of snakes. All this is done in the cold opening. The hat, and the leather jacket, you could say, the whole look. He kind of grabs from that guy who leads the how do you call it, Scott? That they're legally finding this, right? They're legally finding these artifacts and keeping them.
Yeah, it seems to be. I mean, they just seem to be like a bunch of. I wouldn't say they're archaeologists, because they don't seem to have that level of sort of academic process. But no, they're just more like treasure hunters, aren't they? Like Tomb Raiders. Yeah. But there doesn't seem to be any illegality about it. Even the sheriff turns up later on and is like, "No, it's his. Give it back."
Yeah. But that was a nice twist though, because you do. I mean, I at the beginning, I first thought when I first saw it, these are treasure hunters. They look mean and they look bad. They're chasing Indy. Brilliant chase scene through the train. But yeah, what threw me at the end was, after all that, they turn up at Indy's door with the sheriff, and he has to hand it over. It's certainly not the ending that you'd expect for this little opening, but it was just really well executed. That's all I can really say.
Yeah, I know. It's one of those that sort of like going back and watching it. Like I love this whole opening. I mean, like you said, it's full of adventure. It's got the action. It sets up the character, and like you said, River Phoenix plays it so well. Even like the cadence of the way he talks. Because he's got like a slightly. He's even got like a slightly chubby friend. So they're overlooking. They're looking down into a pit where these treasure hunters are, and they're sort of like, "What do we do? What do we do?" He's like, "Well, go back and do this." But the way he's talking to him, the way River Phoenix is talking to his friend, like it's clear that he's watched Harrison Ford, and the way that he sort of, it's so well done. And there's that level of sort of like slightly grumpy annoyance at not being listened to, and all this other stuff. He's so good. It's spot on.
Even sorry, Scott, to cut you off there, but even when I'm just getting visuals now in my head of when he runs out of the cave, the way he runs is very similar to Harrison Ford or Indiana Jones, the way he runs. So he's obviously done his homework, and it's those little things that, as a viewer, you really do appreciate, because you may or may not pick it up, but there is a consistency there.
Yeah, it's tragic to know that sort of like, obviously River Phoenix never made it really to adulthood, and it's a tragic story, but it shows like what could have been. Like, he's a great actor in this. Like, he really could have been something special in the 90s. But yeah, I have to admit that the chase, like, it's then a chase on horseback. He's been chased in the car, but the pinnacle of this is, like you say, is an entire sequence across the top of a train, or in and out of a train, and some other stuff. Yeah. This is where I will say, like, I love it, and I will admit I do love it. I think so. The sequence, like, where the rhino's putting its horn up through the top of the train, and like the humour there is great. Yeah. it's the one problem I have with prequels, and this seems to be the it happens in many prequels. It sort of seems to be a bit of a prequel trope. Is okay, what do we know about the character in the future? Okay, we've got to stuff answers in for all that into this prequel. So in this one adventure, you do, like you said, you get pretty much everything. You get like a scar under his chin. You get the use of the whip. You get the fear of snakes. You get the fedora. And I'm thinking like, oh man, it's a bit. I still love it because it's all fan service. But even now, I'm a bit like, okay, it's a bit much. Like, it didn't need that much. Like, I'd happily accept that he got his fear of snakes at another point, or even the scar or something. But it's good, but it's a bit much at times.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it holistically in the film, it really does. They really do pack it in at the beginning. But what I do like anyway is that they do. I mean, throughout the film, you do get even more tidbits. It's not like it's the be all and end all there at the beginning. So I mean, the thing that springs to mind for me is towards the very end about how he gets his name. And why he's been called Junior all the time, because as a viewer you're thinking, isn't his name Indiana Jones and his father's Henry, so why is he calling him Junior? But that was played on throughout the whole film, like a little aside joke, but then it gets explained at the end as well. So I like it how you do get the fan service at the beginning, but they do pepper the movie with little things to do
Definitely.
with...
I definitely agree. And they run parallels, and some of the stuff they do. There's some. I'm gonna save it to the end of when we talk about this film in summary. But there's something about this. There's some things about this film that tell me why Kingdom of the Crystal Skull should never exist, and probably this fifth film should never exist as well. But but yeah, I mean that cold opener. You could watch that cold opener, and it jumps forward in time to sort of 1939, and you got Indy on a boat in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, and he finally retrieves the Cross of Coronado and this sort of stuff. If you were to just block that out, like if that was a comic, it would be a really cool sort of like one-shot comic.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean? It's a really good short. So yeah.
That thing, sorry, at the end there with the boat scene, I thought it was really interesting, and it's one of the things I think that this film does, which it does more so than the other couple of films, is that it does tend to get almost, I don't know how you describe it, almost cartoonish in the sense that for me there was that bit where the boat explodes, and is the guy's name Coronado, the guy with the
there's the Cross of Coronado. That's the name of the cross.
That's the cross. Yeah, but anyway, the guy in the white suit with the red rose, and the boat explodes, and his hat sails by, all frayed and everything, to signify that he's died as well. Those sorts of little touches make it, I don't know, a little bit cartoonish, the same way that that Indy's hat always seems to make its way back to him. But then again, there's also a little charm in that as well. It's something that's very Indiana Jones, but it could also come off as a little a little too outlandish.
I know exactly what you mean, and as you say, the hat coming back to him, like you say, especially later on in the film, there's a scene later on where that happens. It literally rolls up to him, and I can imagine there's someone just off screen, just sort of like rolling it into shot.
Exactly.
But I know what you mean. So again, we get into the plot, and you get again this sort of same thing of a similar thing really to the first film. Like, you get a visit from. Someone sort of, firstly you find out more about Indiana Jones as a professor, but he gets introduced to a figure of authority, in this case a guy called Walter Donovan, who has been working with a group to unearth clues to find the Holy Grail, and you find out that Indiana Jones' father has been doing, but has gone missing, and obviously he's now got to go to Venice to find him. So what are your thoughts on the setup of this? Sort of like, it's not. I don't know if he's a philanthropist or some sort of just a businessman or something, but he's.
Yeah, when I was watching this, I remember clearly having this thought in my head, watching while Donovan was basically laying down some exposition about the whole story. That this looks like. It looks dated, but it looks like dated in a very classic sense. To me, it reminded me of almost like a Bond film. Just in this really dapper gentleman, they're in these nice confines, but he's talking about this tablet that he's got, and what they want to do. So I really enjoyed it. I didn't mind it. It did. I mean, of course, things have to slow down, but it was necessary to understand all of this, and it furthered, I guess, the stakes for Indiana Jones with his father, Henry, who incidentally we don't see for a long time. We get a little sense of him at the beginning in the opening, but Sean Connery is kind of left unseen for quite a while. So
it's almost 50 minutes. It's almost 50 minutes before he comes into the film.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, which is because, like you said, the chemistry those two, Harrison Ford and Sean Connery, have is really good.
Very good.
But yeah, they really hold out for quite some time on it. Like I say, it's 45-50 minutes before Sean Connery comes in, but they don't waste. The time before that isn't wasted, because I mean,
no,
they finally when they do get to Venice and they go and they find the X marks the spot. And again, this is some of the silly jokes.
Brilliant.
I love the humour.
Yeah.
The librarian with his stamp.
Yes, yeah.
And every time he stamps, Indy's sort of cracking the floor and stuff. And there's some great little moments like that.
Sorry, that's the one. The type of thing I'm thinking is like kind of cartoonish, but it has a certain charm to it, like only an indie film. Like you wouldn't kind of get that. You wouldn't kind of get that in in the earlier film, but
No.
But it works kind of here as well. I don't know. I guess because we trust the character, we know what's happening. So I found that hilarious. And X marks the spot is so. I don't know. I found it so cool when I first saw it. I don't know about you. Yeah.
Well, it pays off because there's a line early on, when he's actually teaching, where he actually says to his students, and X never ever marks the spot, and then like literally within 15 minutes he's like, X marks the spot.
Yeah. So there's a lot of really clever. I think those sorts of things, like they just tie things up really well. And so the Venice thing is great. So we get more action. And they go into the underground. Alison Doodie's really good as the Doctor. I liked, just to step back a little, I like the Casanova in Indy coming out straight away. There's a lot of flirting straight away, and he kind of swipes that flower for her. So you kind of get a sense, and I think they have a decent amount of chemistry. You get a sense that they're going to at least be an item in some capacity.
Yeah, and you get this is the third film, and so you're getting that idea of, almost like a Bond girl kind of thing. You're getting the indie girl. You've had sort of Karen Allen, you've had Kate Capshaw, now you've got Alison Doody, sort of like, the attractive female companion that's going to be on this adventure. But she's more than capable. Like, she's obviously a doctor and a scientist, and she's very capable.
Yes.
And but I again, like you say, when they go underground, I love this whole stuff in Venice. From the finding of the knight's tomb, where they got the instructions on his shield, and it's all very exciting. They get like the rats, but then it goes to that sort of like the boat chase, and through Venice. Oh, it's amazing.
It is good. You have to have a boat chase when you're in Venice. So, it was really well done. I think I mentioned as well previously that Last Crusade has a chase with every mode of transport possible. And so we get the boat scene here. But going back to that, it's almost, again, another little mini adventure when they go underground, uncovering, is it one of the brothers that has been entombed there, and he's got the shield which has inscriptions that are the same as the tablet. And later on, when Indy meets up with his dad, Henry Jones says, "Oh, so you saw him, and you found the tomb," and you're kind of watching it, going, "Yeah, we actually saw that. Like, that was a whole adventure." But we actually saw that earlier on. So I think that was very well done. And these guys, what are they called? The cult.
It's the
protectors of the Grail.
What's it of the guard with the cruciform sword.
Yes. Oh, your memory's better than mine. Yeah. No, that was good. And what did that ends? That last scene at the boat with the propeller.
I love it.
Really good. Yeah.
It's so good. Because I like the fact that I say that I mean, there's two bits in this I really like. We've had the setup, but it never really pays off. But we've had the fact that like Indy is terrified of snakes. You know, we've obviously seen
Yes.
why at the start of the film when he fell into that vat of snakes. But you also now get told that his father is actually terrified of rats.
Yes.
So there's almost like a bit of a joke there that like fear of certain animals runs in the family.
Yeah.
Which is again like that a nice little nod.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, this whole chase, and let's say the boat scene is great because I like the fact that the thing I like is when they get they're being run down and attacked by the sort of these guys that they're protecting they're designed to protect the Grail. You know, for thousands of years that's what they've been doing, hundreds of years that's what they've been doing. And it's only when Indy says I'm not chasing down the Grail, I'm looking for my father.
Yes.
That the guy's like, oh, fair enough.
Yeah. Okay then. Oh, just drop me off over
hands
here.
Up. That's it. Yeah. It's like. All this could have been just ask.
I know.
Time.
Just a little bit of miscommunication just goes a long way. One of the other talking about miscommunication. One of the nice gags in that boat chase scene for me was when the Doctor, Elsa, and Indiana Jones, they're on the boat, and Indiana Jones goes, "Don't go between the boats." She goes, "Are you crazy? Go between the boats?" And so she goes through it. It sets it up for a great stunt because they make it through just in the nick of time, and their pursuers unfortunately don't. But it's that kind of injecting that comedy with the action, again, as we mentioned, which is part and parcel of Indiana Jones.
Yeah, I agree. I think, like, again, they don't miss an opportunity to sort of to balance that humour with the action in this film. Like throughout, they always sort of the balance is just perfect. I think.
Yeah.
Because it does. They obviously they get the information, and then they find out where Indy's father is being held at a castle in the Austrian border. I mean, this film goes all over, like more so than any of the other films. Again, this is a real travelogue because they start in America. It starts in America. They go to Venice, then they go to Austria, and then they go elsewhere. But they go to this castle in Austria, and again, like they're playing it not so much for laughs, but it's sort of played, silly. Like Indy puts on a Scottish accent to pretend to be another sort.
That's right.
To try and get in because he wants to see the tapestries. And
Yeah.
You do. I can't remember when it says, "You do have tapestries, don't you?" And you get the Austrian butler. We do have tapestries. Yeah. It's,
and does he say something like, and he goes, "If you are Scottish, then I am Mickey Mouse." And that kind of gives the whole game away. Yeah.
But I've always wondered, even maybe not so when I first saw it, but like watching it over and over again. One of the jokes of obviously whenever Sean Connery is in a film, like he's not, I always think of Highlander, where he's supposed to be sort of Ramirez, a Spanish conquistador that was trained in Egypt, and all this other stuff. You're like, well, you're clearly not. You still got a Scottish accent. So I always wondered if like Harrison Ford doing that Scottish accent was a bit of an in joke at the fact that like Sean Connery's playing my dad, and he undoubtedly has a Scottish accent.
Yeah. Oh, it could well be. Yeah, I mean, who knows? It seems to be like it would have been a very fun time on set because you've got these two big stars, right? And they obviously, I don't know. Well, I don't know how it goes behind the scenes, but they seem to get along very well on the screen. So, and there seems to be, you can tell there seems to be a mutual respect for both of them because it would be easy to say that one of them might overshadow the other or try to overshadow the other in the film, but they share it equally, and rightly so, because it is an Indiana Jones film, but at the same instance, you do have Sean Connery there as well, a legend. So.
Yes, definitely, and this is where you get to meet the two. Now, it should be noted they're obviously playing father and son, but there's only 12 years between them.
Oh wow! Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So that's one of those sort of weird things of Hollywood. So yeah, they're not as sort of distant as it probably sort of suggests in this. But yeah, no, I love this sort of like there's some they get great gags. They find out where he is, and Indy sort of using his whip crashes through the window into the room where his father is. And and his father instantly hits him with the vase.
Yeah, and then he checks the vase as well for its value,
His authenticity.
the authenticity, and the joke is on him because Indy thinks that he's concerned for him, but it's not. He's concerned he's relieved because the vase is not an antique. So again, jokes are plenty here, and I feel as well like. If we were to, we were talking previously about Temple of Doom and Raiders of the Lost Ark and the personality of Indiana Jones, and for me, he kind of changed into more of a grumpier person in the second Temple of Doom. Over this third one, I think it is because he plays off his father, Sean Connery, that we get a very different side to Indiana Jones. But for me, he still seems like Indiana Jones. But there's very much I've reverted to my son mode to this guy. Like,
yes.
I'm a swashbuckling treasure hunter, but the moment that I'm with my dad, I become this kind of fumbling, ever apologising or ever trying to explain myself sort of son. And I think that's what adds to his character here. And it's a much more appealing personality, I think, than, say, his kind of grumpier, almost arrogant attitude in Temple of Doom.
No, I'd agree, and it's funny that I actually, in sort of like reading up on for some of these bits and pieces, I came across an article that pointed something out, which is exactly what you're sort of highlighting here, and it sort of said they called it the hidden arc of Indiana Jones. Mm-hmm. And it was a suggestion that, like, yes, they were released in, Raiders, Temple, Crusade, that order. But if you take them in sort of like canonical, actual chronological order, so actually you do, it's Temple of Doom, Raiders of the Lost Ark, and then a couple of years later it's 35, 36, and 39. That's the sort of the years these are supposed to take place in. And this article was actually suggesting exactly what you're saying, is like, actually what you see if you watch those films in that order is this lightening up of Indiana Jones.
Okay, right. Yeah.
And that he starts out, like you say, in this sort of like, as a, because he's, we said at the start of Temple, like, he's willing to sacrifice. He's like threatening to stab Willie Scott to get a bloody diamond and the antidote, and everything else. And then Raiders, he's still sort of grumpy, but he's a bit more willing to, he's a bit more humorous. And he's sort of a bit more willing to sacrifice. And then by this film, as you say, he's a bit more lighter still. Yeah. And it does seem like there's a sort of the adventures are having an impact on him, and actually sending him on a change. So I think you're right, and I think this is sort of the end result. And this will come to my point of this should have been the end of the series, at the end. But yeah, and I love the dynamic between these two, because you're right that you when you're out with your friends or your colleagues or whatever, you yourself, you go home and all of a sudden you do revert back to that position you have with your parents. Yeah,
that's it.
And and I like the fact he's quite cheeky to his dad as well. Sort of like, his dad sort of says, "Why did you hit me? I thought you were one of them." He says, they tend to come through. They tend to come through the door, sort of.
Yeah, and there's the desensitization to death and violence. I think the first couple of times Henry calls Indiana Jones Jr., Indy finds himself with a machine gun, and he just mows down the Nazis. He goes, "Don't call me Junior." I mean, a horrific scene, but played lightly, and you have to laugh, and because they're Nazis. And I want to point out as well, one of my favourite lines, I don't know, it just sums up Indy so well, is when he first sees him and he goes, "Nazis, I hate these guys." It's just there's a bit of irreverence towards them, but he obviously has tussled with them before, and I just love the way that he approaches them.
I agree, and I think in this whole scene, sort of in this castle, this Austrian castle, you sort of and again, this comes down to both the quality of acting from Ford and Sean Connery and the direction from Spielberg. Is you quickly get everything summed up. Like, okay, here's the relationship now between Indy and his father. We've already established what Indy's like. So here's some information about, in little snippets. Here's some information about sort of Henry Jones. Because as you say, sort of, Indy's tantrum at being called Junior and then killing a bunch of people, and that's a hell of a tantrum.
Yes.
But I like Henry's response. He's like, "You killed those people."
Yeah, exactly.
He's like, "Yes, I did, because they were going to kill us. Like, let's move."
It's so funny.
They have it later on, don't they, when they're trying to escape? And he's like, "These people are chasing us." He's like, "Yes, I know." He's like, "What's this? It's a new experience for me. It happens all the time."
Oh yeah, that was hilarious. Sorry, you're just jumping ahead. No, I think Henry goes, "I think they're trying to kill us or something," and he goes, "Yes, they are." and Indy's hat is all funny, so it makes him look like even a funnier version of himself, because they're running away from this plane. Anyway, that's later on, but just the annoyance that Indiana has for his dad, and everyone or any son can possibly relate to that. It's just with their dads, like, "Come on, Dad, come on!" Like you're dragging your feet, and so it's just funny to see.
Well, he even says that, doesn't it, at one point?
Yeah.
He says he just said, like, "Come on, Dad," and sort of like calling him down to hurry up. And again, they're different approaches. They get, because obviously when they're running around the castle, they get caught, and he's got his things like the part with the lucky lighter, when they're but they've been tied up. I like the fact that sort of the two ways that the Germans, because they're talking to Indy, they clearly see that Indy is the threat.
Yes.
And so Elsa sort of gives him a soft. She gives him a kiss, and she says, "It was wonderful." And Sean Connery's like, "It was pretty good for me."
Oh yeah.
It goes to show that sort of the apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
No. But you can also just see the disgust in Indy, like the realization. It's like, "What, Dad?" Because you never want to think about your parents, doing that sort of stuff. So, and he's actually gone to bed with the same woman that has. So it's very funny. Yeah, but that lighter scene is hilarious. It's again, it kind of touches on that trope of being tied up and stuff and trying to get out of it. But I just love the expression on Sean Connery's face when he does kind of drop the lighter, tries to blow it away or blow it out, and it just causes more mayhem. It's really funny stuff.
It is, and this is where I think sort of everyone thinks of sort of you think Sean Connery, you think probably like James Bond, and you think of him in that sort of role, but actually he's got some comedy chops in this. Like his timing's pretty good.
Absolutely.
And I think he's willing to sort of come across, because again, like he's lost. He's not using the wig. He's clearly showing that he's balding and that sort of thing, and he's happy to look a little bit of a buffoon. So, it's quite cool that he's actually willing to sort of be this sort of slightly, as you said, befuddled older professor next to Indy's sort of adventuring treasure hunter.
I wonder what he thought of being offered like the role on Indiana Jones. If he was indeed aware of Indiana Jones, if he liked it and felt a sort of honor to be on it or not, because he seems to really enjoy himself in this, and it does seem that he does at no point phone it in. Like he really just puts himself in there, and he loves his role, and he's got a very well written role as well. I'd say he's got a nice juicy part in it. So yeah, no, I wonder if Sean Connery was a fan before he came into it.
It's interesting because I think what would have attracted him. Would it be the Indiana Jones films? I mean, obviously he had two out, but also you got to remember at this point, like Spielberg could do no wrong. This is a Spielberg film. George Lucas is obviously not tarnished. He's obviously got Star Wars behind him. Yeah. Maybe slightly tarnished at this point because he had Howard the Duck behind him as well. But if Steven Spielberg steps in and says, "Do you want to play Indiana Jones' dad?" And he's like, "Are you directing?" "Yes, I'm directing." I'm in. That's sort of
true.
Spielberg at late 80s is sort of late 80s, early 90s is him at his peak, isn't it? Really. So it must be. But you're right. He does give it all. He's all in on this, and he's great. And again, like you see, this film never stops because you go from the castle straight into like this. The chase continues, and they've got. Yeah. And I'd never thought about this before. You're right. This has got a horse chase, a chase a train. We've had a chase in boats,
motorcycles,
and now we're gonna get motorbikes.
Yeah.
It's it's quite frenetic. Like the film doesn't let up.
No, I mean, and in between all that as well, there are, the fight scenes as well, like with them escaping from the fireplace. Again, comedy. They go into that hearth, and it revolves around, and there's a secret Nazi, I don't know what it is, communications room, and that German lady gives an awkward smile before she just screams out "Schnau, schnau, schnau," and it kind of makes light of the Nazis and Germans, and again it's very classic old school stuff of that revolving hearth, and you see Henry Jones there, and then you hear a punch, and then it revolves around, and you see just a Nazi officer slump down. Kind of, I don't know, really harking back to the old school types of films, I think.
No, I agree. This is still like living in that sort of old school serial adventure, isn't it? That this is, and I honestly think this is where they perfected it.
Yes.
If we were to, I'll ask to rank these at the end. All of them, but I do think this is where they get it spot on.
Oh yeah,
and they get they obviously go on the bike chase, which is again has got some great stunts in it. Like there's guys being sort of like thrown off motorbikes, they're doing jumps, they're doing all kinds of stuff. Like it's really solid. Sort of, it stands up. Like again, practical. None of this is CGI. It's all practical.
Yeah.
So yeah,
and there's also again I'm gonna hark back on it about the comedy. There's that bit where Indiana Jones really does enjoy, like he gets one of the Germans and he kind of cackles to himself, and then Henry kind of gives him a disapproving look and he kind of reproaches him with his eyes, and he's going, oh, okay, all right. So again, just the father-son dynamic, it works really well. Because we're just so used to Indiana Jones being such an assertive, grown-up, individual. We saw him in Temple of Doom, doing things, with voodoo and such. Now he's got his dad, he just kind of reverts him back to his old self. It's really funny.
No, it's a really good point, actually. You're right, because he's sort of, in the two previous films, he's been almost like the heroic authority figure, hasn't he? He's the one that's had the knowledge, he's the one that's had the sort of the capability to do these things, and all of a sudden now, he's almost, like you say, he gets not embarrassed and frustrated, I suppose, with his dad around.
Yeah. It really does throw him for a bit.
Yeah. Because you do get the thing where they want to go catch up with Brody in wherever he is, to go, because they've now established at the start of the trail, they know the trail to get to the Holy Grail starts in the city of Alexandria. But this is all, and they've got to get through the three. There's 3 tests before God. He's like, okay, well, what are they? Well, they're in my diary. Where's your diary? Well, it's in Berlin. And it leads to a sort of a slightly throwaway scene, really, but it's still really good. Where Indy, they go to Berlin. He sort of faces up to Elsa. He gets the diary, and then accidentally bumps into Hitler.
Yes. What did you think of Hitler appearing in like a real historical figure appearing in Indiana Jones?
I was I'm sort of fine with it, because it's one of, it's supposed to have been set. It's a period piece. Again, it's a throwaway joke, but it's quite a lot of setup for a throwaway joke, because they've got like a whole. It's not even like a small scene. Like it's a whole parade. Like it's like in Nuremberg or something. Again, this sort of like the Indies reaction is fantastic, because he gets bumped in. He's there. He's got the diary, and Hitler sort of literally bumps into Hitler whilst they're in this parade, and they look at each other. Hitler opens the diary, which has got all this information, like all this occult information, which Hitler would be loving on, and he just signs it and then moves on.
It is so funny, and Harrison's reaction is hilarious, because he's holding it. It doesn't look like initially it doesn't look like he's offering it to Hitler. He just turns around and he's just holding it there. But Hitler's obviously in the zone, and has his lackeys behind him. Just give me the pen, I'll sign it, off I go. It's just something you would not expect. I mean, I've spoken to some people I know who love the film as well, and just in general not too keen on having like real life figures featured in this, because I guess it's a fantasy. But I had no qualms with seeing Hitler in it. I mean, he, regardless of whether he looked totally accurate or not. You know, it is meant to be Hitler, and it's as you say, it's a one-off. So
Yeah, it's a sort of a throwaway joke.
yeah,
And then again, sort of, you then get to our another form of transport. You get air travel. You get a blimp that leads to the airplane. But like I said, they take a stop, and this is quite an interesting part, really, because they're on the blimp, and you get a conversation about between Henry and Indy about their father-son dynamic, about how they feel. Indy feels that Henry was as a father, and how Henry feels he was as a father. What are your thoughts on that scene?
Yeah, I actually, again, this is in one of my notes as well. When I did watch it, I was thinking, okay, this scene is quite memorable now for me, because at first I thought it was just a bit of filler, because setting up the scene later on with the whole blimp and it turning around, but it is actually important to get a bit more, to actually have it said in words. I mean, we've seen the actions that they take, and we've seen underlying currents of how they react to each other. But Indy hits it on the head on it, and he really just confronts his dad. And I guess they're trying to work through the issues. But Henry, whether or not he totally gets it or not, he does explain that, I gave you independence. I gave you this idea that, I was a fantastic father. Now, whether you agree with that or not, I think is beside the point. But it does show, it does give a bit of insight into both of the characters. Like, it shows from Indy how he felt, the way that his father was treating him. But it also showed Henry Jones and how he thought he was raising his son, and yeah, I found it quite interesting, and it was brief enough. It wasn't too long, but what did you think of it?
Yeah, it's almost like a tip of the iceberg kind of deal. I do think it's really interesting because it does give that information and that glimpse into their sort of dynamic, especially when Henry does say to him, I was a wonderful father. Like, I never told you to do the dishes. I never told you to tidy your room. But there's a moment in response to he clearly thinks he was doing the right thing,
Yeah,
but then
he does. Yeah, he believes it. Yeah.
Yeah, but then I'm trying to think: is he trying to convince himself? Because after that, there's a further hint. It's just even Mother didn't understand, and one of the things that's not explained actually it's not. At the very start of this film, you see obviously River Phoenix. He runs into the house, and it's you see the back of his father, sort of, and Sean Connery's voice comes up.
Yeah.
But there's no mention of his mother. And what's not actually sort of stated in this, but is actually covered more in sort of like the young Indiana Jones adventures, is that his mother died when Indy was very young. I think his mother died about probably about 2 years before 1912. I think it's in 1910 or 1909 that his mother died. And so this sort of what you don't realise, or it's sort of alluded to, but it's actually sort of expanded more in some of in almost a Star Warsy kind of way. There's actually additional material that sort of expands on this. That actually the death of his mother, so obviously the grief that his father felt, is what drove him to become more and more obsessed with the Grail. It was this sort of like his escape. And unfortunately, it then led him away from Indy, and that's how they became separated, and they become less.
Right.
Yeah. So there's a whole bunch of stuff. I mean, if you follow the Young Adventures, Indiana Jones leaves home in 1915, goes to Europe and joins the Austrian army, not the Austrian army, sort of the Belgian army, to fight in World War One, and then goes on all these adventures from there, and never goes home. After that, he never goes home. So technically, it's alluded to that he's spoken to his father and stuff, but it's been about 20 years since they've really spoken in this way.
Yeah. Was that a TV show?
It was, yeah.
It was, okay, because I vaguely remember it, but only because you've just mentioned it now. Okay, wow, so there was a TV show of Indiana Jones. I've really got to look that up. Yeah.
It's worth seeing. The adventure. It's a bit. I'll be honest with you. Each one's like a feature-length adventure, and I will admit they vary in quality.
Okay.
Mainly based on budget and what they're trying to achieve, but there are some that are absolutely fantastic. There are some really, really good ones.
Nice.
So yeah, no, I would recommend the Adventures of Young Indiana Jones. if you can find them on Blu-ray or DVD.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess they had to. I mean, viewers would probably be asking, because you do see father and son. They probably would ask, where's the mum? So they had to address that, I think, and they do that quickly enough, and vaguely enough that that it's kind of put to bed very quickly. But yeah, no, I think it was. Despite there being no action at all, I found this one of the most interesting scenes where they actually do have time to sit and talk about their relationship, which was, yeah.
It's good. It's a good. Again, the pacing is great because again, it's a bit of a beat before. You've got this beat where you get them sort of having a heart to heart, and then it's followed pretty much straight away again by a chase. They sort of they jump into a biplane and they're being chased down, and the sort of again sort of the fumbling. A reference as well, though. Again, sort of I didn't realise you learnt to fly. He's like, fly, yes. Land, no.
Right, yes. Reference to his days in
Temple of Doom when he actually didn't know how to fly. So clearly taken lessons in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love again the plane chase is great, and it leads to another car chase and all this other stuff. So it's just non-stop action. To be fair,
I mean, and not overly action packed. I always think of Van Helsing, starring Hugh Jackman. When I don't know if you've seen that, and when I watched that in the cinemas, it just seemed there was unrelenting action, and it just got too much, like to the detriment of the story and the characters. But in this way, I mean, Indiana Jones, Last Crusade, a lot of action, but there is time to understand and to know the characters a bit more. And again, that mix with comedy, he's just great. I mean, that plane that goes through the tunnel with them, that poor German guy, without the wings, and they're kind of looking at him, he's looking at them, and then it just kind of blows up. Yeah, it's great. And over here, this scene was great in the beach, because, as you mentioned, Scott, Henry Jones is pretty much a bumbling old man for most of the part, but he shows his worth here, and something very unconventional. And I like this because he's not an adventurer like Indy. He can't wield a sword or a gun, but he does take out his umbrella. And I remember in the cinemas going, what is he going to do? This is some pretty nifty MacGyver kind of like stuff. But no, then he just scares the seagulls, and that's enough to get that last plane to crash and burn. And then he quotes Charlemagne, which is really cool.
I do like that bit because he's quite sort of smug, isn't he? So I remembered my Charlemagne, and no, it's good. Again, it comes down to that dynamic between them. Sort of like I'm just invested in this film throughout. I think I've probably watched this more than any of the others. And I do. I think this is all great, because it does. It moves quite quickly. Then they sort of they've got everything they need. They're going off to sort of they've got to catch up with Brody because they realise that Brody's got the rest of the map.
Can I just say as well, Scott, one of the most hilarious bits of comedy in it was Indiana Jones's spiel about Brody. He's got a 7-day head start. He's got networks all over. With a bit of luck,
he'll blend in.
Yeah. With a little luck, he would have found the Grail already. And then cut to Brody, who's in a suit, going, "Does anyone know where this is?" For me, there's been a steady degradation of poor Marcus Brody throughout the films. He was kind of okay at the beginning, but he becomes a bit of a mess towards the end.
Yeah, it's true because again, throughout the films, he's always been sort of obviously like a minor character, but in this, he's obviously played more of a part, which seems like I think Spielberg sort of like giving him a payoff, but they make him a bit of a comedy character because, like you say, there's a great line when they do say that, and Henry Jones actually says to Indy, later, he says, "Oh, so you really think he'll have got along that far?" And he's like, "No, he got lost in his own museum."
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, exactly.
I was making that up. Yeah, I do. I think that's some great moments like that.
Yeah, classic.
And that's where we get Salah again, and they obviously do get to meet up, and they get taken. I'm trying to think of the transition because they get to the end, and they obviously Denham Elliott, Marcus Wade, does get captured.
Yes, in the back of a truck, and it
that's
gets
what, because he gets
away.
separated. Yeah, he gets separated from Sala, doesn't he?
Yep. Well, no, Sala actually rushes him, hurries him into what looks like a stall, a shopping stall, but it happens to be a truck already waiting, and they kind of bundle him up, and off he goes.
Yes, and then he sort of, because you get sort of Sala looks a bit peeved that he's been tricked.
Yes.
And then it sort of comes to the sort of the third act, and you get this sort of they're looking for the Canyon of the Crescent Moon.
Mm.
And so they've left Alexandria and they're going across the desert, and you've got the Nazi sort of Donovan's there. Walter Donovan's now caught up with. He's obviously been part of it now. You've seen that he's actually a baddie. Elsa's now a baddie. So they're all going across the desert, and they've got like tanks and jeeps and all this other stuff. And Indy's there with just his father and Sala and a couple of horses. And I have to admit, this whole tank scene at the end is. We've talked about the action before, but this sort of tops it all, doesn't it? Sort of everything. It's just so good. I mean, what are your thoughts on it initially?
I mean, I'm thinking all the action scenes in this are top notch, but with the tank, I remember just watching it again, going, they got a bloody tank for this film. No, it was great. The whole thing. The whole thing with the what do you call them? The tracks that have it on there. That Henry Jones falls on it, and Indy gets him with the whip. The whole thing that Indy's caught on one of the cannons, and that it was really, there was a lot of stuff happening, but it was so much fun. And Henry Jones just trying to save Marcus as well, Marcus Brody. And actually, again, we see a bit of Henry against the German. He squirts him. The pen is mightier than the sword, which Marcus mentions. So we get a bit of Henry in the action. But there's so much just there to talk about. I'm just kind of rambling off randomly of these bits and pieces. But I loved it. I think it was great. And we see the end of. What was the gentleman that the Nazis got?
Vogel.
Vogel. In a very looking at it again, a very obvious model of the tank, because you could see little Vogel there just at the top clinging. But no, it was really cool, and there's that bit of tension with Indy going off the edge as well, and there's a moment of sadness, but again, comedy. Like this thing, Indy's behind them, looking over the edge as well. What are we looking at? I just love it. I love it, and the hat scene, as you mentioned, it comes back.
Yes, yeah. Well, you're right. This whole scene is so. And again, like I'll put this on Spielberg, and obviously they must have some great stunt coordinators, because the sort of the way this scene escalates is so good, because you sort of you have them sort of trying to. They know that Marcus is in one of the tanks, and so they're trying to get into it. And I'm not sure what. So Indy's just trying to get to that, and then he uses the pen, but then Henry Jones gets taken hostage, so he's got to get them out of the tank, and so it just sort of escalates from sort of like, say, horse versus tanks. He puts the rock in the gun, doesn't he?
Yes,
that's right. It blows one of the sort of side sort of guns up.
Yeah, again, a bit of a cartoon. A bit of a cartoon moment. Yeah.
Yeah, it is quite cartoony, but they keep balancing it out with sort of like some of the tension and some of the action, because he gets on the tank, and like you say, the best bit, you've got the guy who's got like a periscope looking out the tank.
Oh, that's right.
And as he's fighting, Indy's face gets squashed up against the top of the periscope. Yeah, it's very silly, but it's brilliant. I'm so sort of enjoying this whole thing, because it's just so it's so practical. Like, they are on top of a tank riding through a desert, and I know it's obviously all stunt work, but like you say, when they finally get out and they get out the tank. And like you say, Sean, Denham Elliott's like, how does one get off this thing? And he gets accidentally punched in the head and just sort of falls off the back. Yeah. But then, like I say, Sean Connery being dragged across the tracks, and Indy's got him he's holding the whip with it around his ankle, whilst he's fighting somebody else off and all this other stuff. Like it's so well orchestrated and so well filmed. Like, it just sort of it's perfect adventure action for me. But the payoff, like you say, the payoff of all this, again, like this film's got heart. I think that's one of the key things.
Yeah,
This
very much.
dynamic and sort of relationship between Indy and Henry. They think Indy's gone off the edge of the cliff. That when that tank goes off with Vogel, they think Indy was still attached to it.
Yeah.
And so they're sort of like mourning him, and it's that moment of realization for Sean Connery. Like they've gone through all this. He's seen what his son does, and they actually said, he sees he's on the side of right and all this other stuff. And then when he thinks he's gone, he says, like, I can't believe he's gone. Like just 5 more minutes would have been enough. There was so much I wanted to tell him.
Yeah.
And like you say, they're doing this sort of like thoughtful, mournful moment, and you do see Indy sort of looking over the cliff behind them, shaking his head like,
I know, it's terrible.
That was mad, wasn't it? That was crazy. Did you see me on that tank? That's mad.
Yeah.
And then, but when he sees him, the joy, like Sean Connery playing it really well, like the joy in his face. He's like, "Oh, you made it, boy!" And gives him the hug and sort of everything.
But then,
sort of like,
but then he stops. Like when Indy then slumps down, then he's back to the old father again. It's like, come on, no time to lay about. We've got a Grail to get. So enough time for emotions.
It's weird. It's almost because you can read. There's 2 ways of sort of seeing that, because I agree. That's how I've always read it. Is that sort of thing of like, well, come on, then he sort of like he sort of like realizes he's showing a bit too much emotion and sort of like buttons himself up again. So come on, we've got a Grail to find. But really, watching it this time as well, I took it as he's full of so much sort of adrenaline and verve. He's like, well, I've not only have I've won this, we've won this battle. I've got my son back, and I'm just so excited. Of like, we're almost there. Like everything's coming to fruition.
Yeah.
And it is good, but it's sort of like it's almost like you start to see that the sort of this relationship that's been building over the last hour of this film is coming to that fruition. Sort of like all the realizations of where each person was coming from is starting to break down.
Yeah.
And so it comes to the thing when they do come to the temple, and they find actually that the Germans have already made it there. So Walter Donovan's already made it there, and they are sending in sort of troops, and each troop keeps getting their head cut off. And you're not sort of sure why to begin with.
I think this is. Sorry.
Yeah,
no, I was just about to say, I think this is really cool because what was very successful with the Raiders of the Lost Ark at the beginning, the opening, they've now put it at the end with all these funky booby traps, which made the beginning interesting, because it's all about infiltrating this temple. Same thing here, right? But this is the Act 3. This is the finale. I think it was a masterstroke really as well, because that was one of the essences of Indiana Jones that we love so much, and it's used now in the climax and the finale of the film, and having these 3 kind of tests to guide. It was really, really fun indeed.
Yeah, and I like the way they motivate him as well, because he's sort of, at first he's sort of like they hold the gun to Indy. He's like, I'm not going to do it. He's like, maybe I'll give you a reason to. And they shoot his dad. They shoot Henry Jones, knowing that part of the law of the Holy Grail is that it can be life-giving. So the water poured from it can heal all wounds. And so basically, if he gets the cup of Christ, he can actually heal. He can save his dad. And so that's the motivation. And again, it's another sort of like eroding. It's that possibility of losing that thing, of being able to bridge the gap of like, okay, I can't let him die because we've finally started to bridge that gap. So I've got to go and save him. That's what I want. Again, it sort of keeps hitting those emotional beats. But you're right about the 3 tests are so early Raiders.
Yes,
I never thought about that before. It's a really good point. Like this is paying off. The first, very, very first scene we've ever seen of Indiana Jones.
Yeah, which is funny because as you mentioned, it wasn't the very first scene of Indiana Jones, but it is one of the most memorable and one that sticks with people's minds when it comes to Indiana Jones. You think about archaeology, you think about all these things that he kind of does. As stealing the artifacts, these ancient booby traps, and it's used here, but this time from the Knights Templar or the Holy Crusade, and it is a test of faith, for Indiana Jones. I mean, because he doesn't really believe it, right? But he's going to have to now because they shot his dad, and the only way his dad,
Let's be clear though. How does he not believe? Like literally years before, he saw the effect of the Ark of the Covenant. Like he's going, you've got to believe, have faith. And I'll be like, yeah, it's not a problem. I've I've seen the effect of like supernatural. I'm pretty good with believing.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true. You would think. I don't know, the human mind. Maybe he's locked that away somewhere in his brain.
Maybe,
but he definitely doesn't. He doesn't have faith. I mean, but he has to do it anyway. It's the only resort that is left to him. But he uses not only faith at the beginning though. You've got to crack a few riddles. And I love this. One of the most quoted things that me and my friends used to always do would be the penitent man.
Yeah.
Past the penitent. Just reciting that over and over. But very, very smart from Indy. Cat-like reflexes.
Yes, I like it. Yeah, the penitent must be sort of the penitent kneels before God. Yeah. I didn't realize they had to, but I didn't realize they then had to do a somersault as well. So
yeah.
But it's very good because I like the fact that these first three or these final three booby traps aren't supernatural. They're sort of. I mean, they are probably a bit more technical than they probably had the ability to do, but. They're not supernatural, so there's like these two sort of rotating blades, and then it's you have to spell out the word of God, which is the name of God, which is Jehovah, and of course in the Latin alphabet, Jehovah begins with an I, as I've learned from this film.
Yes, me too.
And so you get that, and it's and then goes to the step from the lion's mouth.
The lion's mouth, yeah,
and
that was brilliant.
Yeah. It's really cool. It's just a disguised bridge. It's a very narrow bridge, but it's a disguised bridge. And so I love those three booby traps. I think
would you have stuck your foot out there, Scott, if you were in that predicament? I mean, that's a big leap of faith, like what Indy does.
That's a leap of faith on the line. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I would have tried to jump it or something. I wouldn't have stuck my foot out and just fallen forward like Indy did. But brilliant that he did, and I love it because it's so ingenious and it's nothing supernatural, as you say. It's just smart. Use of perspective, use of illusion. It's good.
Because I like the reveal because it does it sort of like the camera pans round and you see there's actually a bridge there and stuff. So it's very cool.
But it makes sense as well because the mouth where the lion's head is, you don't have enough room to actually look around. You're forced to look straight on, and I think that's so technically, if you really think about it, it's like that would work because you wouldn't be people would say, oh look, why don't you look at it at a different angle? You can't because you're kind of stuck in that little opening. So in that way it addresses that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. That's a really good point. Yeah, it's a good, and so they do pay off, and then he finally gets to the sort of the room that contains all these multiple cups and the final brother, the sort of the knight Templar that's been there sort of hundreds of years protecting these things. Yeah.
Which is the first like kind of supernatural.
He's in black and white, like he's like a grey blue, like almost.
Yeah.
But. Yeah, and you get the cups of Christ. So what are your thoughts about this final bit then, sort of the room of the cups of Christ?
Oh, I loved it. I mean, again, they don't overplay the supernatural elements because at the moment it was all a big adventure. Everything was grounded in some sort of reality. So this is the first instance that it's like, oh my God, there's a knight here, and he's immortal, or he's a spectre, or he's something. But it was done well. It didn't come across as too cheesy for me. I love this idea about the Grails being hidden amongst. Is there some sort of legend or lore about that? Because it kind of rings true about a Grail concealed amongst a whole lot of cups. I don't know if that was just made up for this film, but I love the idea of it being disguised like that, and you have to choose. I really enjoyed it. I liked how the knight kind of pondered at Indy's attire. This is pretty weird looking, and he knew that he kind of had a feeling that Indy was going to be his successor. Yeah, no, it was really good. But followed shortly by Donovan and Elsa. Again, we get a bit of a horror thing at the end. Not as good as the melting face in Raiders of the Lost Ark, but just as horrific, and right in front of Elsa's face as well. So she kind of gets her just desserts.
Yeah, sort of, but there's something about that. So the question is, so they come in and the knight looks a bit confused, and he actually says to them, like, you have to choose, choose wisely.
Oh, yes.
He says sort of, and this is interesting because this is something I'll come up in a bit, but drinking from the actual cup of Christ can grant extended life, and all this other stuff. Choose poorly, and if you choose from a drug, it will cause death. And so Brody sort of Donovan sends Elsa, says go choose one.
Yeah.
And she chooses this really gaudy sort of like gold chalice with diamonds and jewels and shit all over it, and gives it to him. She says, "Oh, this looks like the cup of the king of kings." Did she do that on purpose to kill Donovan, or did she just make a really poor choice?
Oh no, I think she chose. She knew that. I think she wanted him out of the way. Her end goal was the Grail as well.
Yeah, for herself.
You see towards the end her greed. Yeah, she wanted him gone. And she it was a bit ambiguous. She had plans apparently to share it with Indiana, whether or not that was another lie, just to kind of further herself. But you see her like grab it. Before she kind of drops it and saying, we've got it, we can do this together. So yeah, no, for sure, she had no allegiance to Donovan.
No. So she gives him this cup, and like you say, he ages exponentially. His hair all grows, his skin sort of goes all grey, gets mummified, and then he just sort of turns
what
to
is
dust.
happening to me?
Yeah. I love the knight's reaction. He just sort of looks at them both because he chose poorly. And so then Indy has to choose a cup, and he chooses a small sort of like wooden, very small, modest sort of wooden cup. And he says, "Oh, this is the cup of a carpenter."
Yeah.
Or it's like a brass, or it's like a very worn, tatty looking thing. And that's the actual cup of Christ.
Well, that had I had my heart in my mouth there when I was first watching this, because he's putting his life on the line. He just saw what happened to Donovan. And it's like a 1 in 50 chance, because there are like 50 or so cups there.
Yeah.
So yeah, very exciting stuff.
It is. It's played well, and then so he uses that. It works, and then he obviously fills it with water, rushes back, and uses it then to save Henry, sort of on the bullet wound that he's got, which is great. And he pours some in his mouth. And it saves him, and all the soldiers are like, shit, and sort of run off. But then there's a thing of like, you can't take it across the seal. There's a great seal on the floor, and Elsa does it, and the building starts to fall apart and all this other stuff. And it's sort of that's the final piece really. And they lose the Grail, and this is the thing where again you get this final moment of acceptance between father and son. Of sort of like, he's like, "Fuck, I can reach it, Dad." And instead of calling him Junior, he says, "Indy, take my hand." It's just. I think it's just. This is the final sort of like this. Their relationship. It's them sort of like bridging that gap, and it's sort of like he wants to save Indy. So these final moments. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I thought that scene was very well done as well, because again it was set up with Elsa in the same predicament. Indy was holding on to her. Says, you gotta grab my hand. I can't hold you much longer. But her greed got the better of her, and then before you know it, Indy is in exactly the same predicament. But again, it shows his character, and he's not like Elsa at all, and he listens to his father. I loved it. I think it was a great way to end it. Big bells and whistles, the whole temple kind of crumbling. This whole thing about not crossing the seal was brilliant. I did think originally, when Indy did drink from the water at the fountain, would he then have an extended life? Because they talk about the brothers, I think, before had drunk from it, and they hadn't been stuck. It has nothing to do with the seal. I'm assuming the seal came later on. But they lived to an extended age. So when I first watched it, I was always wondering, does that mean that Indy is kind of not immortal, but he's, going to have an
It
extended
has an
life?
extended life. Well, this is sort of comes to my final sort of thoughts about this film, because you're very rich, because I've always thought that.
Yeah.
So he drank from the cup of Christ, which is supposed to give you extended life.
Yeah.
And you're right, the brothers lived to well into sort of, I think one of them was 160 something and one was 180 or something like that. And obviously the one that's in the tomb has been having sips of it daily because he's been there for hundreds of years. And so you sort of, the question is, okay, so that means that both Henry Jones and Indiana Jones have now got extended life.
Yeah.
So for me, this is what I think this film was supposed to and should have remained the
Right.
last of the series. Because if you, and also the thing I said, we talked about the Young Indiana Jones series.
Yeah.
One of the final episodes has an old Indiana Jones in his late 90s, I think it's 96, 97, and he's sort of living in New York, and he's sort of like, they've got some old guy to do it and stuff, and he's still quite spry and all sort of stuff. And the suggestion is that even at 96, like, he's still going, not on adventures, but he's still doing pretty well, you know what I mean?
Okay.
Which sort of indicates that, so that this extended life thing may have been canon.
Yeah.
And so, you sort of have that. And the other thing is, like, so this film's called The Last Crusade.
Yes.
Oh, okay, right. It resolves. It's not been part of the previous film, but it resolves a parental relationship. So it's bringing sort of, it's trying to sort of resolve an arc for Indiana Jones. Mm-hmm. The last part of the film, the other thing is that they're literally searching for the Holy Grail, which, is in sort of often in parlance is used as that sort of like the ultimate thing. The Holy Grail. We're searching for that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And the film literally ends with them riding off into the sunset.
Yeah. Yeah. That's it. It's got all the hallmarks of really a beautiful tie-up to a trilogy. I could not agree with you more. I think it really does round off everything. It explains everything. You feel like you know Indiana Jones inside out now because you've got his history. You've got a lot of the references now explained. I fear for... Because, I love the Die Hard series as well, but I have been very hesitant to watch the latter ones because I think it's just kind of sullied the whole franchise, and I fear that this is what's happening with Indiana Jones as well. Although we still have Harrison Ford, it's just not the same.
No,
there are some bright bits, but not enough.
Yeah, I love this film, and I'll say from start to finish, I think Last Crusade is wonderful. It's a wonderful film. It's a wonderful Indiana Jones film, and should have been and remained the final film. I think that would have been a great trilogy. Yeah. But we are going around. So, what are your final thoughts just on Last Crusade before we jump into Kingdom of the Crystal Skull?
Look, just final thoughts. This is probably one of the most quoted films, certainly from Indiana Jones, that myself and my friends have done as we've grown up. Going back, I love the, this is how we say goodbye in Austria, Dr. Jones. This is how we say goodbye in Germany. I think I much like the way they say goodbye in Austria. That sort of stuff. The thing with Marcus Brody, so there are just so many little bits here, and you've got a good film when things are quotable, because they're obviously memorable. And anyway, I think this is a culmination of what Spielberg and Lucas, what they've been trying to do when they set out with Raiders of the Lost Ark. I can't say that they necessarily got better from Raiders of the Lost Ark to Temple of Doom, but by 1989, I think they knew, and Spielberg's skills had come to a particular level that he knew exactly how to craft what he wanted to craft with this, and everything aligned. I think the writing, the actors, I cannot laud this enough. I absolutely love this film. I can rewatch this over and over again. It's up there with Predator, Scott. It's up there with Predator.
No, I totally agree.
Yeah,
I think Last Crusade. It's Raiders is iconic. But I honestly think Last Crusade, and people may have something to say about this, I honestly think Last Crusade is my favourite and possibly the best Indiana Jones film. Which is hard to say about many trilogies. They don't usually end on a high note.
It is. Very hard,
yeah. But anyway, so we jump to 20 years later, to 2008, and the release of Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. And I'm going to be honest. I don't want to spend a great deal of time on this film because it makes me angry. But
Okay.
it came out 2008. I was excited. I remember sort of seeing things, and then the trailer came out, and I remember seeing the trailer, and I was like, this doesn't look great.
Yeah. It has all the. I mean, it still retains a lot of the ingredients, say, of what makes up an Indiana Jones film. First of all, I mean, I was kind of off-put by it as well. I'm going to say that one of the main, I think, flaws for me for it is for this film is that it's set in the 60s, and although period pieces are great and they do the 60s looks like really
50s.
well.
57. It's set in 57.
Oh, 57. Okay, so 50, okay. Well, still, it's a good 20 years after. It doesn't have that that pulpy kind of charm to it that the others had. So straight away, there's a different kind of tone to it. And second to that, Indiana Jones, Harrison Ford, as much as I love him as an actor, as much as I do, and in his action in this, I mean, he's still quite spry as well, or his stuntman is, in any case. It's just not the same Indy. I mean, he doesn't have that energy that Indiana Jones has. It just comes across, he comes across as a little bit fatigued, and that's because he's older, of course. And thirdly as well, I think I was off-put by him being a colonel as well and having such a military... it's interesting that you mentioned that in the TV show. It shows how he worked through World War One and all that, and apparently now he's got medals and he's reached the rank of colonel, and he's now become something a bit more than just a treasure hunter. He's like officialized, and it's just, I don't know, it's not Indiana Jones as I kind of see him.
I totally agree. I think that there's some things in this that sort of, like I said, that work, and the majority don't. I mean, one of the other big things for me is, we've talked about in the past films, it was all practical. Like, the things to mention is, even when things were done on set, like the opening part of Raiders of the Lost Ark, that boulder. Yeah, sure, that's all done on a set, but it looked great and it's timed well with actual on-location shoots. And then, in Temple of Doom, they've got some great, stuff actually shot in India and on the back of elephants and all that sort of stuff. And then in Raiders, all the stuff on Last Crusade, all the stuff on the back of a tank, and in Venice and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. Nothing in this film feels like it wasn't shot on the back of a film lot somewhere. Yeah. Or in a green screen. Like, it just looks. Do you know what this film reminded me of? It reminded me of the Star Wars prequels.
Okay. Yeah, I could see that. Totally see that.
That's how it felt for me. But you totally right about the rest. I mean, I'll just crack on with the plot. Just to give us again, sort of like directed by Steven Spielberg, written by David Coep, who has done great things actually. Story by George Lucas. It stars Indiana Jones as Harrison Ford as Indiana Jones, Kate Blanchett as Irana Spalko. Karen Allen returns as Marion Ravenwood. Shia LaBeouf comes in as Mutt Williams. We'll get to that. Ray Winston as Mac. John Hurt as Professor Oxley. And Jim Broadbent as stand-in for Marcus Brody, Dean Stanforth. So the plot for this really is you get it's set in the 50s, and the desire from Spielberg and Lucas, and that was to move with the times. And so you'd had all the pulp adventures, as you said, the adventure things of the 30s and 40s had moved to become science fiction films of the 50s. So the whole film is based around a crystal skull, and it starts by an attack, a break-in at Area 51, and a chase through that, which results in a nuclear explosion, which Indy survives by sitting in a fridge.
A lead-lined fridge.
Yeah. Then basically the film progresses from there as he returns to university. Oh, he doesn't actually. He gets taken in by the feds and questioned, and then when he returns, he is introduced to Mutt Williams, who's a young sort of greaser, who tells him that Professor Oxley has gone missing, and they basically go on an adventure to find Oxley, and in doing so they uncover a crystal skull and have to return it back to the sort of lost city of gold and to whoever lives there. and by this point I've lost complete interest. However, the first 10 minutes of this film promise something that doesn't pay off. So this whole thing of sort of like the break into Area 51 and where they use the gunpowder to find the chest with the alien in, and then the chase out, and all that sort of stuff, right? Yeah. Up until Indy gets into the testing town, the nuclear testing town, is actually all right. That first 10 minutes, I'm all right with it. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, look, when I first saw it, I'd probably agree as well. The first 10 minutes or so, that kind of interested me because it was an introduction. Everyone was hankering to see Indiana Jones again. We saw him. He did well. I loved him scaling those containers, using the gunpowder. That was fun. His theme came in when he swung down, so you get him evading gunshots again. It was all a lot of fun. Same with the nuclear blast and him go. I thought that was fun. I mean, a level of disbelief you've got to suspend there, but off he goes in the fridge. So first watch, and then it kind of goes downhill. Like when I rewatched it just last week, I think I made a lot of peace with myself for this film, because I honestly enjoyed it a lot more than when I first saw it. I guess maybe because I knew what to expect. I knew it wasn't going to be wasn't going to be the same heights or the scale of Last Crusade, and so I just kind of went with the flow. And so anyway, just back to your point about the first 10 minutes, I thought it was well done. I thought it was good. The only thing that was kind of, and I didn't mind the alien twist to it as well, because there was always a supernatural or a out of world element to Indiana Jones, and for this it was aliens, and I thought, okay, that's pretty cool. But yeah, I think it was the settings, as you say, the 50s, which kind of really threw me. But no, I enjoyed the performances. Cate Blanchett, she was really good. I loved her in it. I
will agree with that. I think I actually I like Cate Blanchett anyway. I do think she's really good in this.
Yeah, and actually I didn't like Shia LaBeouf first, but then when I did this rewatch, he does okay. He does fine. I mean, he's meant to be a bit of an upstart, and I think he played it well. But I'm not a fan of kind of this era unless it's around Back to the Future or something like that. I don't know. I don't see it with Indiana Jones. But the action scenes were fun. I don't know. They were all kind of done well.
It's interesting. I mean, the thing is, like you say about the alien at the beginning. The thing I'd mention is when you go back to the original trilogy, one of the key things that we've said is that the supernatural is kept to a minimum. It's almost like a payoff. So there's nothing supernatural in the opening of Raiders. It's not really until the very end when you get to see the Ark opened and the spirits all come out. And with Temple of Doom, you get some sort of inkling of it about 2/3 of the way through when you see the guy's heart removed. But it's not really till the end again when you see the sort of the heart spit, and Indy's doing the chant and they heat up and fall into the river and stuff like. The supernatural's kept to a minimum, and then with Raiders, Last Crusade, again, like the real supernatural is not till the very end when you see the Cup of Christ and its rejuvenation powers. With this, within the first 10 minutes, they're like, oh no, aliens exist. Here's one.
Yeah.
I was a bit like, oh. So you're not going to make this ambiguous in the slightest. It literally is. Aliens are... All right, fine. And that's where I was a bit like, okay, this is different. It's a different Indiana Jones film. It's a slightly different take. And so that's sort of... And then, like I said, when he survives a nuclear explosion... And again, like you said, I know they're fantasy, but it's always been... There's always been a sort of element of reality. Whenever he fights, he's been beaten up. He's had to recover or whatever. But to be blown up in a nuclear explosion and survive in a fridge, and then more than that, he opens the fridge, falls out, and there's a gopher sat there, and it's like, oh, you're going for jokes that aren't funny. I don't.
No, I will agree with you there. I mean, look, hey, if there is a nuclear holocaust, Scott, I am running to my fridge. I don't know about you, but I'm gonna. But no, the tone was just off. I mean, and exactly right. I mean, it was laid out at the beginning with aliens, and it's like, no, like it just didn't feel right. I mean, and I know that you can't just rehash things over and over again. But what Last Crusade showed is that you can take the elements, you can stick with it, but you can still make it a very successful film. So there's no reason why they couldn't follow a particular, say, formula, but maybe inject something different. But I think they got it wrong with trying to go with the times. But having said that as well, you've got an older Indiana Jones, so you're gonna have to explain that somehow.
Yeah, and I'm happy with I'm sort of happy with the time shift. You know, going into the 50s, and again, like introducing a younger sort of side, sort of companion that can then complete some of the more action heavy scenes.
Yeah.
It's just the fact like I say, Shia LaBeouf isn't actually a terrible actor. I actually think he's pretty good. He does fine with what he's given, like with the character. I think that it's almost, I don't know. There's some great. I mean, again, there's some actually good gags in this that they do pay off. Like the whole thing when he sort of when Indy's talking to him, he says, "What do you do?" So I'm a mechanic. I dropped out of school and I've become a mechanic. And he's like, "He said, it's just what I've got a passion for." He's like, "Well, don't let anybody tell you different. You do what you love, and don't let anybody tell you different."
Yeah.
But then when he does find out it's his son, he's like, "Well, you're going back to school because you get an education."
Yeah. Yeah. There are some great moments here as well. I remember laughing out loud in the cinemas with that action scene with Shia LaBeouf standing in between the two cars, and the foliage just whacking him in the crotch over and over again. I know, very simple juvenile humour, but it was just, I found that hilarious. There are some bits of humour here that work, and again, I like the way that he's actually tied in. You mentioned the big reveal, like he's the son of Indiana Jones and Marianne, and it was great to have her back. It kind of rounded, if anything, it did kind of resolve that in a little bit. That they did have that she was his kind of true love. I mean, we saw no chemistry between Indiana Jones and Willie. Elsa was, she's like 20,000 feet underground somewhere. So Marianne's the only one really left, but she was the original. So I like that kind of cyclical thing about she's back again, and she's the mum to Mutt. So I kind of like that. And also, again, there's that little touch at the end where Shia, or however you call him, he picks up the hat because it rolls in down the aisle as they got married at the end, and he thinks about putting it on, but then Indiana Jones just takes it off him and wears it still. I think that was a nice little touch, saying, no. If any of the viewers thought that Shia is going to be taking on the new mantle as Indiana Jones, no, it's still pretty much with Harrison Ford.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, he's not on the cast list for the new film, so.
Well, he hated this film, didn't he? Didn't he? Like he panned it, and Harrison Ford was really angry at him, apparently, saying that you got to be professional. You can't just slander your own work, blah 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 blah. But you know how Shia LaBeouf is.
Yeah, he's a bit of an odd one, isn't he? But yeah, no, he hated this film. He didn't enjoy being in it. He didn't like the base product. So yeah, he was a bit upset. But the problems with this film is, I say, going through the plot, it is fine. Like I say, I've read a lot of the additional sort of Indiana Jones material, comics, books, those sorts of things, and they do sometimes they do go into this sort of sci-fi realm, and they work okay. But as you say, he's more of a sort of a pulp sort of, it's the sort of supernatural really where he works better, and it's fine again. Sort of like I like him having this sort of like younger sidekick. Especially as an older who can take off some of the action. I just think the issue comes for me in Harrison Ford's great again. He's fine as Indiana Jones. And I kind of like him having this older, gruffer sort of thing of sort of like been there, done that. The problems I have is sort of with the filmmaking. Like I say, it all looks like it belongs on a plot. Like everything feels very enclosed.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
Nope. When they're in the jungle, or even when they're in that sort of the big city at the end, like, it never feels expansive. Like the thing with the other films is that you felt the locations, you could feel that it was a part of something. I just never feel it with this film.
It makes a big difference, doesn't it? Makes a big difference when you're on location.
It really does. So makes a difference. But the other thing is, when you sort of find out that he sort of like, so Indy sort of has his friend called Mac, and Mac was was an MI6 agent, and they worked together during the war, running 30-40 missions, whatever. And all of a sudden, I'm thinking, that sounds like a better film.
Yeah,
I want to go. I want to go see that.
Yeah.
So,
That was Ray Winston, right?
Yes. Yeah. So there's other stuff that I'm thinking, that sounds like a better film. Can we get some of that, like that story? And you never do. So there's just bits and pieces throughout it that sort of like, it's fine. The bit where they have the motorbike chase in this through Stanford or wherever it is. That's pretty good.
Yeah, that was cool. Like going under in the library, going under all the tables. I thought that was pretty cool. And what are you saying? It's you're not going to find all the answers in the books or something. He's telling his students. Yeah.
You need to go out in the field. Don't spend all your time in the museum. It's. And again, like, there's moments like that I'm thinking, that feels like the old sort of style Indiana Jones. And then, like I say, it sort of falls by the wayside again. And this whole thing, I mean, again, John Hurt's character as Professor Oxley, who's obviously been possessed or sort of like impacted by this crystal skull, and has become sort of like a bit of a bumbling sort of fool because of it. Like, he's it's obviously taken away all of his mind. It's fine again, but it's sort of you're never quite sure if it's supposed to be played for pathos or for humour. Do you know what I mean? So like, there's where the previous films had a bit of heart or whatever. Like, this film just seems to lack it. Like, I don't, you've had that father-son relationship resolved in Last Crusade, and now they're trying to maybe go for a similar dynamic here, but it just never seems to get to the same resolution or thing as Harrison Ford and Sean Connery. There was a moment in this film where it falls off a cliff for me. It just falls off a bloody cliff.
Yeah.
So you like the room, like I say, up and down. To begin, like that first sort of half, I'm fine with. There's bits where I'm like, okay, I get that. That's fine. They go to the old Mayan ruins. And there's those sort of like little Mayan ninjas kicking their ass.
Yeah, they're cool. Yeah,
they're quite cool. And then they find the crystal skull and all that stuff. When they get to the jungle, all right, and all of a sudden you've got these massive like things cutting down trees that the Russians have created, and then there's a chase through the jungle. And as you sort of said, some of it's not too bad, right? But you get this chase for the skull, and they're jumping from one vehicle to the next and all that sort of stuff. And it starts off and I'm like, interesting, I see what they're doing. Looks very CGI heavy, but I'm fine with that if it looks good. Mm-hmm. Then it gets to the end of it and you get three things which just throw me out of this film. Yeah. The first one is the ants.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Right, those ants which just, I don't know, I can't explain them. They just sort of like killer ants. Yeah. Then there's Mutt Williams becoming Tarzan and swinging with a bunch of monkeys.
Oh, yeah.
Which I'm like, all right, okay, that's two down. And then you have Marion Ravenwood, who Cara Allen's fine in this film. I think she, she's does fine with what she's given and everything. But she's sort of like she's driving like a I don't know, like a Jeep boat thing, and she drives it off a cliff, and she's like, no, it'll be fine, knowing it'll be fine. Lands in a tree. The tree then takes them down quite gently to the river, and she's like, see? And then they go over 3 waterfalls.
Yes.
And it's almost like it's done like it's played. You said about the previous ones being slightly cartoonish.
Yes.
This is Tom and Jerry level ridiculousness.
That is. Look, I laughed, but I didn't mind the ants. I thought the ants were pretty cool, only because it gave us a little bit of that horror bit where one of those German, the main Russian guy, he gets kind of eaten, and you see another German getting put, another Russian getting taken into the ant hill. I thought that was nice. The swinging on the trees, absolutely ridiculous. I laughed at when they were going off the waterfall. I'm just like, that's almost by the third time they get to that huge one. they're all going, this is just ridiculous. Come on, I mean, like, and it's the biggest waterfall. They all fall off. It was very cartoonish, and I think in this instance it's too cartoonish. You know, if we would compare it to the Indiana Jones, I don't know if you can measure it in subtlety, but yeah, this was just really in your face, swinging with the monkeys. I mean, no. Especially when it's released 2008, the audiences aren't going to buy that. You know, they're not going to buy that. So anyway, it's audiences change over the decades, and what works in one time and becomes a classic, and you look back on it and you enjoy it, is not going to work if you do it in a modern film.
No, the thing was, and that's exactly what I was thinking. Like, if you were to have released sort of, the previous three in the early 2000s, like, would they have landed? Would they still be the classics that they are today? Good point, because it depends what they're competing with. I had a quick look, and I've literally just rechecked it. I wanted to see what this film was competing against, because it's obviously trying to sort of fit into that realm. And I think, do you know what this film feels like to me? I've said about the prequels, and the prequels were obviously sort of like 2000, was it 1999, 2002, 2004, 2005, something like that. So you're sort of a little bit beyond those. But you're also competing then with Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yeah.
And that also feels quite heavy on this. You know, that
Right.
sort of ridiculous level of action.
Yes. But then you get... Sorry? But then you get also 2008, wasn't that also Iron Man as well?
It was.
Which I think blew action out of the water. I mean, it's still a great film on a rewatch, but that's totally different. There's no like I say now, there's no over the top cartoonish like levels there. There's a bit of comedy in it, sure, but it's nothing like like this or Pirates of the Caribbean.
Well, the difference is, I think this is sort of Pirates of the Caribbean. That first one was sort of 2003, something like that, and then you've got the second two, 2006, 2007. So it's competing with sort of those sort of films.
Yeah.
And they have like extraordinary levels of action and some ridiculousness as well, like massive monsters, big sort of like ships and supernatural sort of entities. But the difference is between them and that is that whatever they put into Pirates of the Caribbean, one of the things they were determined to do was be shoot on location.
Yeah.
So again, like when you see sort of like Tortuga or any of those other places, like they're being shot in Jamaica or they're being shot somewhere that looks cool. And again, like this just feels so. It feels like a big film, but feels small.
Yeah.
And I think that's what. But I honestly think they are trying to compete with. Oh, we've got to try and outdo Pirates of the Caribbean or whatever, and it just doesn't work. It really doesn't work.
Yeah. To the detriment of the characters, because you've got a greaser who's swinging off vines with monkeys, like. That it doesn't work. Like,
no,
any human being can't just freely swing off, trees like that. It's a bit crazy. And that tree, didn't it also with that boat? Didn't it also then swat away some Russians again? So it's very very over the top.
So, and then you obviously get to the end, they've got the skull, and I'm not even going to go into the plot like we have with others, because I just don't think it deserves it. Yeah. They finally get the skull, and they return it, and you get, like, the end of the films. The final of the last three has always been this notion of sort of, like, you get a glimpse of the supernatural. Like, the majority of films, in reality, but you get a glimpse of the supernatural. Like, there's something greater, but you're not going to be told everything.
Yeah.
And with this, it literally ends with the aliens explaining everything, sort of to an extent of like not telling them, but you get it all. Like throughout the film, like Indy's sort of espousing exposition, and then you get the aliens becoming an alien at the end, and you see the alien, and it kills Irana Spelko because she wants all the information, and then you see a UFO take off.
Yeah.
And
I know. It was It just there's too much on the nose. If that's I guess the way you can explain it. There's no subtlety in it.
Nope.
Everything is being thrown at you. Everything has been trying to dazzle you, like with and I say that with they try to dazzle you with with money, like with the effects and all that. It's not you don't appreciate like the skills and stuff of all the old school stunts and stuff. So yeah, I mean, again, that last line that Oxley says, it's the space between spaces. I mean, I remember again laughing out loud in the cinema. It's not meant to be funny, but it's like, oh
No.
god, this is eye rolling kind of dialogue. It was just so corny. Yeah, didn't really appreciate it at all. And the ending, again, on the rewatch, I just found it interesting because I'd only seen it once in the cinema before. I thought that was enough, but I thought, I better do a rewatch. And I mentioned I did kind of enjoy this a lot more, but for kind of not the same sort of enjoyment as when I enjoyed Last Crusade. But yeah, it's
No, it's. I mean, it's better than some films. It's fine, but compare it to the previous three, like.
No, yeah, well,
it's
yeah. When you have to compare it to its predecessors, then that's when it falls flat. Maybe if you take it as an action film, and somehow distance yourself that this is Indiana Jones and there are 3 films before it. If you somehow just detach it, it's fun, but it's just not Indiana Jones. That's kind of the best way that I can sum it up. It's not.
Yeah.
What we'd expect, or it's not the style. It doesn't have that.
I think a way to sort of to sum this film up a little bit as well about its excesses is in previous films there's always sort of, like you say, there's nods, especially in Last Crusade. There's some Easter eggs and nods to some previous things. So when they go to see, or when they're looking for the knights, one of the brothers under Venice, there's a depiction of the Ark of the Covenant on the wall. And Elsa says, "Oh, what's that?" He says, "Oh, it's the Ark of the Covenant." He says, "Are you sure?" And he's like, "I'm pretty sure."
Yes, I remember that. Yeah.
And that's it. Like, it's just move on. With this film, they go to the Area 51. It's the big warehouse, and to sort of prove to you that it's the same place that was shown at the end of Raiders, you literally get to see a smashed crate with the Ark of the Covenant in.
Yeah.
And it's that same thing of, like, instead of a subtle nod, it's like, look at this.
Yeah.
Do you remember the old films? They were great. And you're like, yeah, they were. I might go watch those instead.
Yeah,
actually.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't know. Is this something that you would? You're talking about watching. Would you rewatch this? Like, just
I've got it on Blu-ray. I picked it. Do you know why I picked this up? Because I actually had this. I've got the original trilogy on. Raiders through Last Crusade. I've got them in the Steelbook editions, so
nice.
I really like them.
Yeah.
And I actually had the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull on Steelbook as well, and I was like, I don't want that. So I sold it, and I picked up. I picked up this Blu-ray from a pound shop.
Okay, right.
Kingdom of the Crystal Skull from a pound shop. That's where it is currently in. I can pick this up from a pound shop for £1 on Blu-ray.
I can just imagine your steelbook of the first 3 proudly presented on a display cabinet somewhere in your home, just dusted off, and I can imagine this Blu-ray is in the corner somewhere underneath some newspapers, or
It lives in a box with some other Blu-rays in the attic, and if and when it needs to be pulled out, it will be. But until then, it's being punished. It's staying up there.
Yeah.
But let's round this out then. So if you were to two questions, I want to say. So if you were to rank these, what order would you put them in? The 4 films.
Okay. Okay. Well, I'm gonna. You mentioned that you were tentative about, calling Last Crusade your favourite. I would put I'd put Last Crusade up at the top, just because I think it's a culmination of everything that the creators wanted to instill into Indiana Jones, and it's done very successfully. I'd follow that with Raiders of the Lost Ark, because it's a very strong film. We mentioned before there are a couple of flat bits in it, which I felt that Last Crusade didn't have any flat bits in it, even the exposition-y bits. So you have the very strong opening as well. You can't go past that. Then I'd probably give it to Temple of Doom. I mentioned I enjoyed that a lot more than what I remembered as well. So it's a lot higher. There's less of a distance between second and third for me now, whereas before I would have put Temple of Doom right down towards the bottom. And Kingdom of the Crystal Skull at the bottom, only because on its own it's a decent enough action film, but it's not an Indiana Jones film. That's how I kind of see it. So, one final point on that, because I think one of the things that is different from that as well, you mentioned about how it is pretty cool that he has a sidekick and stuff. The first three films, although he did have supporting casts, Indiana Jones pretty much did everything. Like he carried it all. He did all the exciting bits. He had Sulla, he had Marianne and all that, Short Round. But he did think he was the hero of it. In Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, it was very much an ensemble, and he kind of takes a back seat, like, because he can't. I mean, he's older, and so you get Mutt and you get Marianne and you get Oxley doesn't do much, but that little troop in the final act, they're the ones that discover it, and it's not like really indie. I mean, yeah, he to me, he seems like he has a lesser role. So yeah, I put that at the bottom for sure. Yeah. And how about yourself?
Do you know what? I would mirror everything you've just said. It's at this point I would say, it's Last Crusade, closely followed by Raiders, and then I say just as closely followed by Temple of Doom, which I do think I really enjoyed more so this time than ever before. Yeah. And then down at the bottom of the cliff is being thrown to the
That's right.
The crocodiles. Is Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
At the bottom of the third waterfall is
That's it, yeah. So the final question then, sort of, is to really run this, is we've got a fifth one allegedly coming. It's just been put back to 2022 because of obviously unable to film during the coronavirus. But Harrison Ford, he will be, so in 2022. Let me just check. So. He will be 80 years old.
My gosh.
Really? I just had to check. Yeah, so Harrison Ford will be 80 years old in 2022. So what do we want from a action adventure film, which will be... So again, they can change the years and that sort of thing, but let's not forget that Kingdom of the Crystal Skull was set in 57, so they obviously kept the years difference. So this is going to have to be set, if they're going to keep some of it, at least in the 60s, so possibly into the late 60s. What do we want from an action-adventure film set in the 60s with an action star that will be hitting 80?
Look, I reckon there's only one answer to this, and similar to those films, like the film like Bullet, you just got to have Indiana Jones behind the wheel of a car, and all his adventures just take him, he can sit in the comfort of the car, but he can do his action scenes from behind the wheel, because I cannot see him swinging off his whip. I can't see him scaling cutting a bridge in half and scaling that up. I can't see him do any of that at 80. My God, no. I'm a little worried. But there's a little bit of me thinking that it can be done as long as they maybe minimise Harrison's involvement in the action. But then again, you're not going to get an Indiana Jones film.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. It feels like one of those. And for, I am one of these people that like more is always better. Like I'd love to see more content for these characters. And, I'm not adverse to Indiana Jones being recast and rebooted in some way. Like I'm not adverse to that. I'd be interested to see what they did. Yeah. But do I want to see sort of Harrison Ford? I mean, like you say, the guy's incredibly, he's in great shape for someone of his age. I don't, although he has had several plane crashes of late, so I don't know how that affects him. Okay. He crashed into a golf course not too long ago.
Jeez.
And so it makes you wonder, sort of like, what is this story going to be? Like, maybe it will just be him teaching. Maybe it's just going to be Indiana Jones giving a lecture for an hour and a half.
Could be. Actually, well, that holds true to his character. He could be just in the lecture theatre, just 2 hours of him just talking about, just talking about, I don't know, archaeology. Just I don't know. I don't know.
It seems like a recipe for disaster for me, but I'm happy. I'm more than happy to be proven wrong.
Oh yeah. Look, at the end of the day, I think I'll still go see it. So that's after all this thing about protests about him being too old and stuff, I'd still go see it. I mean, the cinema's got my money for that. Whether or not I'll buy the Blu-ray, maybe I'll look in a bargain bin like yourself.
Yeah.
But
We shall see. Let's see what it is. I mean, Indiana Jones and the Lost False Teeth.
Do we have a title for the last one or no?
No, it hasn't been. It was supposed to be filming this year, and then obviously for a 2021 release, but that's been put back. So I'm assuming they've got a script or something, but I've heard nothing about what it's going to be. So I had a little look, and there's rumours and stuff, but like none of them are founded. So I wouldn't even want to speculate at this point. But Indiana Jones and the broken hip. I don't know. It could be anything at this point.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I don't know.
So
maybe actually, sorry. Last point. Maybe if he takes on the role of if he gets his son back and they rehash a bit of Last Crusade, but Indy as the dad. I don't know.
It could be. It'd be interesting. It'd be interesting. Yeah. So anyway, we've done it. So Ray, thank you very, very much.
No worries.
For
absolute
spending
pleasure.
the time to talk about Indiana Jones with me. I've really enjoyed going back and watching most of these films. But it's been even more so as always. It's been great talking to you as well. So thank you very much for coming on.
Oh no, thank you so much for having me and inviting me to talk about these films. I love them as well. I love Indiana Jones, and it's been a pleasure actually just kind of airing all these things out. And especially I feel like we've kind of gone through some sort of purging with talking about Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. So I feel a lot lighter now. I'm very happy. But thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Do you want to give Into the Night a little plug?
Yeah, sure.
Always happy to give Moon Knight a plug.
Yeah, for sure. So if anyone wants to hear a bit more of my ramble, I host a show, Into the Night, the Moon Knight podcast. It's on, you can find me on Twitter, at ITK Moon Knight. We also have a Facebook page, facebook.com/ITK Moon Knight, and a group as well, facebook.com/group/ITK Moon Knight. We're all on all the good podcast catches as well. So, it's all to do with Moon Knight, a Marvel character. He's going to get his own TV series soon. I'm assuming it's being delayed as well, but maybe 2022 as well. Please check it out.
Excellent. So thank you very much, and Ray, will probably catch you again soon.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. Well, ladies and gentlemen, there you have it, another great 20th Century Geek episode. Thank you for listening. If you would like to get in contact to suggest topics for future shows, or just chat about everything nerdy, you can email me at 20thcenturygeek@gmail.com. That's 20thcenturygeek@gmail.com. Or find me on social media, Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram. Just search for 20th Century Geek. If you would like to support the show, please go on your podcast catcher and leave a 5-star review. I would greatly appreciate it. It raises the show in the ranks and lets more people know about the podcast. If you want to show more support for the podcast, we do have an Amazon wish list. Just go on Amazon and search for 20th Century Geek, and you will find a list of books that will help with research for future podcasts. And don't forget, we love second-hand books in 20th Century Towers. Once again, thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.